The human race has come a long way thanks to medical experiments and testing. We would not have the wide array of treatments, medications, and the overall medical understanding we do without the use of human test subjects. These subjects, however, were not always aware nor consenting to treatments they were receiving. There were times, not so long ago, when unethical and shady medical practices were common. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 controversial experiments. Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Many controversial medical experiments led to government involvement, including the introduction of new laws made to protect future participants and reparations for those who had already participated. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment is just one of these highly unethical, dangerous examples. Also known as the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the African American male, this study was launched in 1932 in Tuskegee, Alabama. In conjunction with Tuskegee Institute, a historically black college, the Public Health Service launched this experiment to study the natural history of untreated syphilis. 600 black men were recruited, 399 of which had syphilis, 201 who did not. The participants were told they were being treated for bad blood. At the time, this was a term that encompassed different ailments, including anemia, fatigue, as well as syphilis. It was also listed as the leading cause of death in black men at that time. As an incentive to participate, they were also told they were receiving free healthcare and treatment from the government. However, these participants were never told they had syphilis, and therefore were also never treated for the disease. Syphilis is known to cause blindness, deafness, mental illness, heart disease, bone deterioration, and the collapse of the central nervous system, and death. This study, which was supposed to last 6 months, dragged on for 40 years. When penicillin became the go-to drug for syphilis in 1947, none of these participants were treated at that time. It wasn't until 1972, when an Association Press article covered the study, that public outcry caused the Assistant Secretary for Health and Scientific Affairs to assemble a panel to look into the experiment. Panel members, which included members from the fields of medicine, law, religion, labor, education, health administration, and public affairs, initially found that the participants had willingly signed up for the experiment. However, they could not prove that they were informed of its true purpose. It was determined that the men were not given enough information to provide informed consent. The panel also found the subjects were never adequately treated for their diseases, which they weren't even informed of having in the first place. The subjects were not allowed to leave the study, even when better treatment options were available. For these reasons, the panel labeled the experiment ethically unjustified and ordered it to be shut down immediately. A lawsuit on behalf of the participants was filed in 1973. In 1974, a $10 million settlement was reached. As part of the settlement, the US government gave lifetime medical benefits and burial services to all living participants. In 1975, wives, widows, and offspring were added to the program. The study highlighted the blatant racism of the time. Those who led the study believed African Americans were more susceptible to the disease because of their race, and that they did not have an interest in medical treatment. This could not have been more wrong. The promise of healthcare, which was reserved only for emergencies in their communities, was one of the reasons many participants joined the study. The victims of the experiment included countless men who died from complications from syphilis, 40 of their wives from contracting the disease, and 19 children who were born with congenital syphilis. The last participant died in January 2004. The last widow receiving benefits died in January 2009. Currently, there are 11 offspring receiving medical and health benefits. Leo Stanley testicle transplants. There was a time where a prison sentence wasn't merely incarceration in a cell, waiting out a punishment. For a long time, prisoners were subject to many medical and scientific experiments. Dr. Leo Stanley was known for carrying out one of the strangest. Dr. Leo Stanley was the chief surgeon at San Quentin between 1913 and 1941. His job was to oversee executions and conduct autopsies, though he did not stop there. His early experiments included sterilization of inmates due to his eugenic beliefs. It is believed he sterilized over 600 prisoners. He also dabbled in plastic surgery, thinking that unattractive men were more likely to commit crimes. But Dr. Stanley was most interested in endocrinology, the study of glands and hormones. His beliefs were that overdeveloped thyroids and underdeveloped pituitary glands were the cause of many crimes. He removed many thyroids of prisoners, claiming the removal turned them docile. His passion, however, was gland replacement. In experiments beginning in the 1800s, testicles were being grafted onto both men and women, claiming doing so could increase vitality, reverse aging, and make impotent men virile. Dr. Stanley had two preferred ways to conduct these tests. In one procedure, he would use testicles taken from deceased inmates, or even animals if none were available. He would implant these into the scrotum of the subject. By doing so, he believed the recipient would absorb the testosterone. This procedure did not give Dr. Stanley the results he hoped for, so he developed a less invasive one. In this version, he would take donor testicles and mash them into an injectable substance. He would then inject this mixture into the subject. He believed this cured acne, asthma, and depression, among others. It is unclear how many of his donors consented to be part of such experiments. Only one lawsuit was known to be filed by a family member who collected a body whose testicles, heart, and brain were removed. The family claimed they had not consented to autopsy. Dr. Stanley was not convicted on this charge. After a tour as a Navy doctor in World War II, Dr. Stanley returned to a much altered San Quentin. When Nazi war crimes came to light, procedures such as sterilization were no longer a favored practice. Though his experiments ended, Dr. Stanley was widely praised by the media for his work. He was considered a revolutionary in his field. In his 40 years at San Quentin, he had given 10,000 inmates, fellow doctors, and the occasional civilian a gland rejuvenation procedure. Dr. Stanley himself got a vasectomy hoping to prolong his life. He died childless at age 90. The Stanford Prison Experiment. It is common knowledge that prisons used to conduct experiments and tests. However, it was not always needed. In the case of the Stanford Prison Experiment, which took place from August 14th to the 20th, a mock prison environment proved to be enough. The Stanford Prison Experiment was a social experiment set up by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. With 24 students, his goal was to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power between inmates and correctional officers. The experiment started with 24 male, middle-class participants. They were tested to be deemed both healthy and psychologically stable. 12 were assigned the role of guards, while the other 12 were assigned as prisoners. All 24 agreed to the experiment, which was to last 7 to 14 days. They were to be paid $15 per day for their participation. The prisoners, with the help of local police, were mock arrested at their homes and were prisoned as a criminal would be. They had mugshots taken and were fingerprinted. They were then transported to a mock prison set up in the basement of Stanford Psychology Building, Jordan Hall. 6x9 cells, furnished only with cots, were set up to hold 3 prisoners each. They were given ill-fitting uniforms, complete with a designated number. Being referred to as a number was the first way the prisoners were stripped of their individuality. The guards were housed separately and were given rest periods and other comforts. They were given batons for discipline and were dressed well, simulating a guard uniform. As detailed in released video footage, the guards were directed not to harm the prisoners, but they were encouraged to create feelings of boredom, fear, and lack of control. They were instructed to give the prisoners no privacy and to attempt to strip them of their individuality. The guards were free to go home after their 8-hour shifts, whereas the prisoners were required to stay in their cells day and night until the end of the experiment. After only 2 days, tension began to rise in the mock prison. Prisoners revolted and the guards answered with violence. One revolt led to the guards using fire extinguishers to subdue some prisoners. Prisoners were referred to only as a number, and after 35 hours, one prisoner began to act up. He exhibited rage and demanded to be released. Sanitary conditions were an immediate issue. The removal of mattresses was used as a punishment. Prisoners were forced to be naked as a method of degradation. Some of the guards became increasingly cruel. It is reported that 1/3 of the guards exhibited sadistic tendencies. Most of the guards were upset when the experiment was discontinued after only 6 days. Early reports claimed that students effortlessly embraced their assigned roles. The guards were quick to adopt psychological torture, with the prisoners easily accepting it. Some of the experiment's findings, however, have been called into question for unscientific methodology. Zimbardo later said that it was more of a demonstration than an experiment. Some of the participants admitted to behaving a certain way to give the study the results Zimbardo wanted. One of them went on to say he did so that the researchers would have something to work with. The experiment was deemed unethical as it persisted even though the participants expressed the desire to quit. Even though they were told they were allowed to drop out at any time, Zimbardo did not let them do so. Since the experiment, new guidelines were put into place. These included any psychological investigation to be approved by the American Psychological Association. The new rules also include that the experiment's outcomes must outweigh the potential damage done to participants. Although other researchers have recreated the experiment, not one of them gave the same results as the Stanford prison experiment. Many believe this is because Zimbardo coached his guards into having the mentality he desired for his experiment, and he was unable to remain a neutral participant. But what do you make of these experiments? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.